Baby, you understand me now. If sometimes you see
Peace. It's your boy Mayhem back with another On This Day in Black History. February 22nd, 1841. Grafton Tyler Brown was born, an American painter, lithographer, and cartographer. Brown was the first African-American artist to create works depicting the Pacific Northwest and California. He was born on February 22nd, 1841 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. His parents were Wilhelmina and Thomas Brown, who were born free in Maryland and moved to Pennsylvania in 1837. His father was a freedman and was involved in the abolitionist movement. Brown worked for a printer in Philadelphia when he was 14. It was there where he learned the skill of lithography. Brown moved to San Francisco in 1858 and worked as a hotel steward and porter. He worked as a lithographer before becoming known as a painter in the 1800s. In San Francisco, he worked at Cutchell and Dressel from 1861 to 1867. In 1867, he opened his own firm. Economic activity in California that was supported by mining activity led to Brown creating advertisements, maps, and script for a range of clients throughout the 1870s. In 1878, he created the Illustrated History of San Francisco, which consisted of 72 topographical images of the city. Brown's work in the Bay Area and in the Nevada territory included documentation of settlements, property sales, claims, and city boundaries. The following year, he sold his company. He left the Bay Area in 1882 and moved to Victoria, British Columbia, where there he participated in the Amos Bowman Geological Survey. While participating in the survey, he served as draftsman and documented the Cascade Mountains. In 1884, he moved back to the United States and traveled throughout the Northwest and West, painting such sites as Mount Rainier. He lived in Portland, Oregon, painting landscapes and also traveling to Yosemite and Yellowstone National Park to paint. Grafton Tyler Brown was a painter whose identity changed from black to white as he moved across the Pacific Northwest. In 1893, Brown moved to St. Paul, Minnesota. In St. Paul, he worked again as a draftsman, this time for the United States Army Corps of Engineers and for the City of St. Paul's Engineering Department. He died in St. Peter, Minnesota on March 2nd, 1918. Brown's works are held in a collection of the Royal British Columbia Museum, Oakland Museum of California, Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento, California, Smithsonian American Art Museum, and the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. February 22nd, 1888, in Westchester, Pennsylvania, African-American painter Horace Pippin was born. Pippin is considered one of the major American painters of his period. One of his more significant works, John Brown Going to His Hanging, is owned by the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts. February 22nd, 1889, white mob attacks black postmaster and family in South Carolina lynching. Frazier Baker, a 40-year-old black man from Lake City, South Carolina, and his infant daughter Julia were murdered by a lynch mob on February 22nd, 1898. Mr. Baker was the first African American to be elected as U.S. Postmaster for Lake City. Despite vehement opposition to his appointment from the white community, Mr. Baker held the position for 6 months. During that time, he was shot at twice and received many death threats. The Bakers lived in a small building just outside Lake City. Their home was a former schoolhouse that had recently been converted into a residential dwelling and post office. Witnesses reported that a number of white men circled the Baker house at night, set the building on fire, and fired up to 100 bullets at the house while Mr. and Mrs. Baker and their 6 children were inside. Mr. Baker was shot to death while trying to escape the burning house. As Mrs. Baker fled the burning house carrying Julia, the baby was shot dead in her mother's arms. Mrs. Baker and her other children managed to escape with their lives, but 3 of the children were wounded by gunshots and permanently maimed. Mr. Frazier and Julia's remains were burned beyond recognition. The local white newspaper intensively reported that they had been cremated in the flames. The federal post office building and all of its equipment were consumed by the fire, and the citizens of Lake City were left without a post office. That's the least of their obituaries. Members of the black community held a mass meeting at Pilgrim Baptist Church and drafted a public statement expressing outrage about the lynching. The murder prompted a national campaign of letter writing, activism, and advocacy, spearheaded by Ida B. Wells and others, which ultimately persuaded President McKinley to order a federal investigation that resulted in the prosecution of 11 white men implicated in the Baker lynching. Despite ample evidence, an all-white jury refused to convict any of the defendants, of course. February 22nd, 1937, Washington State politician George Fleming was born. February 22nd, 1937, in Dallas, Texas, to parents A.R. and Lilla N. Fleming. He started post-secondary education at the University of Washington, Seattle. While attending the university, Fleming was running back and kicker for the Washington Huskies, who was part of the 1960 and 61 team that won the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. In fact, Fleming scored the first points with a 44-yard field goal, which was at that time the longest in Rose Bowl history. In 1961, Fleming was the highest drafted player into the National Football League from the Huskies. He went to the Oakland Raiders as a second-round draft pick with an initial salary of $15,000 and a $3,500 signing bonus. In the 1961 season, Fleming kicked a 54-yard field goal, a team record until 2003. He sat out the 1962 season because of a salary dispute with the Raiders, and the following year went to the Canadian Football League, where he played with the Winnipeg Bombers. Fleming led the CFL in scoring as a rookie with 135 points and set a league record with a 55-yard field goal. Fleming retired from professional football in 1966. In 1968, George Fleming was elected to the Washington House of Representatives. 2 years later, in 1970, he was the first African American to be elected to the Washington State Senate. While in the Senate, he served as vice chair of the Democratic Caucus from 1973 to 1980, and as caucus chairman from 1980 to 1988. While in office, Fleming was an advocate for the underprivileged, a state Martin Luther King Day holiday, control of illicit drugs, improvements in the quality of education, small business and economic development, and civil rights. He also fought to improve the quality of nursing homes for senior citizens and was an advocate for low-income housing and emergency meals and shelter for the homeless. George Fleming retired in 1990 after 22 years of service in the state legislature. February 22nd, 1938, Ishmael Scott Reed, an American poet, novelist, essayist, songwriter, composer, playwright, editor, and publisher known for his satirical works challenging American political culture. Perhaps his best-known work is Mumbo Jumbo, 1972, a sprawling and unorthodox novel set in 1920s New York. Reed's work has often sought to represent neglected African and African-American perspectives. His energy and advocacy have centered more broadly on neglected peoples and perspectives, irrespective of their cultural origins. Reed was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee. His family moved to Buffalo, New York when he was a child during the Great Migration. After attending local schools, Reed attended the University of Buffalo. Reed withdrew from college his junior year, partly for financial reasons, but mainly because he felt he needed a new atmosphere to support his writing and music. He said of this decision, "This was the best thing that could have happened to me at the time because I was able to continue experimenting along the lines I wanted. Influenced by Nathaniel West and others, I didn't want to be a slave to somebody else's reading lists. I kind of regret the decision now because I've gotten some of the most racist and horrible things said to me because of this." In 1995, the college awarded him an honorary doctorate. Speaking about his influences, Reed has said, "I've probably been more influenced by poets than novelists, the Harlem Renaissance poets, the beat poets, the American surrealist Ted Jones. Poets have to be more attuned to originality, coming up with lines and associations the ordinary prose writer wouldn't think of." Among writers from the Harlem Renaissance for whose work Reed has expressed admiration are Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, George Schuler, Bruce Nugent, Countee Cullen, Rudolph Fisher, and Arna Bontemps. In 1962, Reed moved to New York City and co-founded with Walter Boulwart the East Village Other, which became a well-known underground publication. Reed was also a member of the Umbra Writers Workshop. he attended his first Umbra meeting in spring 1963, with others present including Lorenzo Thomas, Askia Torre, Charles Patterson, David Henderson, Albert Haynes, and Calvin Hernton, some of whose members helped establish the Black Arts Movement and promoted a Black aesthetic. Although Reed never participated in that movement, he has continued to research the history of Black Americans. While working on his novel Flight to Canada, 1976, he coined the term neo-slave narrative, which he used in 1984 in A Conversation with Ishmael Reed by Reginald Martin. During this time, Reed also made connections with musicians and poets such as Sun Ra, Cecil Taylor, and Albert Ayler, which contributed to Reed's vast experimentation with jazz and his love for music. In 1970, Reed moved to the West Coast to begin teaching at the University of California, Berkeley, where he taught for 35 years. Retired from there in 2005, he is serving as a distinguished professor at California College of Arts. He lives in Oakland, California with his wife for more than 50 years, Carla Blank, a noted author, choreographer, and director. Reed's archives are held by the Special Collections at the University of Delaware in Newark. Ishmael Reed, an exhibition curated by Timothy D. Murray, was shown at the University of Delaware Library from August 16th to December 16th, 2007. Reed's published works include 12 novels beginning in 1967 with The Freelance Pallbearers, followed by Yellow Brick Radio Broke Down, 1969, Mumbo Jumbo, 1972, The Last Days of Louisiana Red, 1974, Flight to Canada, 1975, The Terrible Twos, 1982, Reckless Eyeballing, 1986, The Terrible Threes, 1989, Japanese by Spring, 1993, Juice, 2011, Conjugating Hindi, 2018, and most recently The Terrible Fours, third in his Terrible series, published by Baraka Books of Montreal in June of 2021. To commemorate its 50 years in print in 2022, Scribner's released a new edition of his third novel, Mumbo Jumbo, cited by Harold Bloom as one of the 500 great books of the Western canon. It includes a new introduction by Reed. On this day in 1950, legendary basketball player Julius Dr. J. Irving was born. Julius Winfield Irving II, born February 22, 1950, commonly known by the nickname Dr. J, widely known as Dr. J. Julius Irving, an NBA legend who changed the game with his own unique playing style consisting of spins and swirls in the air, was born in Roosevelt, New York on February 22, 1950. Irving attended the University of Massachusetts and entered the American Basketball Association in 1971 as a player for the Virginia Squires. After 2 seasons, he went on to play for the New York Nets until 1976, when he was picked up by the Philadelphia 76ers. The team soon began to flourish with Irving's presence, and the team took the NBA championship in 1983. Dr. J was also an 11-time NBA All-Star and a 2-time NBA All-Star Game MVP in 1977 and 1983. In 1987, Irving retired from the NBA and was considered one of the greatest dunkers of all time. He has scored 30,000 points in his professional career. In 1993, Irving was elected to the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. Since retiring, he has worked as a sports analyst for NBC and pursued business opportunities within the league, such as holding an executive position with the Orlando Magic. February 22nd, 1979. That's the year I was born. Castries, the capital of St. Lucia, is also the largest city on the island. The latest estimates show a population as about 20,000. St. Lucia, with a total population of 163,362, that's July 2014's estimate, is part of the Windward Islands chain, which forms the boundary between the Atlantic Ocean and Caribbean Sea. Arawak and Carib Indians inhabited St. Lucia exclusively until 1502, when a group of French sailors became the first Europeans to reach the island. European settlement, however, was stalled for more than a century by fierce resistance from the Caribs. The French founded Castries in 1650, naming it Carègue, which means safe anchorage, in reference to the city's deep water port. It adopted the name Castries in 1756 in honor of Charles Eugene Gabriel de la Croix, Marquis de Castries, and commander of a fleet of French ships. By 1774, the French established an agreement with the Caribs that allowed more European settlement on the island. Also, by that point, the French had introduced sugar plantations and developed a thriving agricultural economy based on forced African labor. Meanwhile, St. Lucia became a major prize in the British-French rivalry for control of the Caribbean and its lucrative sugar economy. During the 17th and 18th centuries, England and France were at war 14 times, during which control of the island switched 7 times. At one point, St. Lucia was considered so valuable because of its sugar production that the British and French were willing to trade all of Canada for the island. In 1814, the British finally took permanent control of the island, making Castries a major naval port in the region over the next 3 decades. Because of its harbor, Castries was the only Eastern Caribbean port that could accommodate the largest warships. Despite the abolition of slavery in 1833, the island's economy remained based on the production of tropical commodity crops like sugar, bananas, and coffee. By this point, 90% of the residents of both Castries and the island of St. Lucia were of African ancestry. From 1958 to 1962, St. Lucia was a member of the now defunct West Indies Federation. The island finally gained independence from Great Britain on February 22, 1979, and Castries became the new national capital. Notwithstanding the fact that Castries has been under British control for over 2 centuries, the city retains a distinctly French flavor, particularly evident in the cuisine and in place names. Significant landmarks include the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception. Built in 1897, it is the largest church in the Caribbean. Derek Walcott Square, named in honor of St. Lucia's Nobel Prize-winning poet, is another major landmark. Walcott was one of 2 St. Lucian Nobel Prize winners. The other winner was economist Sir Arthur Lewis. Castries hosts the Secretariat of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States and the headquarters of the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court. On this day, February 22nd, in 1989, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince won the first Grammy for their single Parents Just Don't Understand. Parents Just Don't Understand is the second single from DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince's second studio album, He's the DJ, I'm the Rapper. The song won a Grammy Award for Best Rap Performance at the 1989 Grammy Awards. One of the 2 songs to do so before the award was discontinued in 1991. It peaked at number 12 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song was released as a single in spring of 1988, referenced several times in the television show The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and was ranked number 96 on VH1's 100 Greatest Songs of Hip Hop. The music video was featured in the 2003 film Malibu's Most Wanted. February 22nd, 2002, Jonas Savimbi, in full, Jonas Malheiro Savimbi, born August 3, 1934, Portuguese, Angola, died February 22, 2002, near Lucas, Angola. Angolan politician, the leader of a long continuing guerrilla insurgency against the post-independence government of Angola. The son of a railroad station master, Savimbi was educated in mission schools and won a scholarship to study abroad. He studied medicine at the University of Lisbon in Portugal and then obtained a doctorate in political science at the University of Lausanne, Switzerland, in 1965. In 1961, Savimbi joined the Angolan independence leader Holden Roberto's Popular Union of Angola, UPA, the rival of the Popular Movement for the Liberation of Angola, MPLA. He broke with the UPA's leader in 1966 and formed the National Union for the Total Independence of Angola, UNITA, which fought against Portuguese colonial rule. Savimbi was the only Angolan guerrilla leader who continued fighting within Angola until the nation reached independence from Portugal in 1975. By this time, he had expanded his initially small band of supporters into a guerrilla army numbering in the thousands. UNITA, was based in southeastern Angola and relied for its support on the Ovimbundu people, the largest ethnic group in the country. At various times, Savimbi obtained support from China, South Africa, and the United States as a counter to the Marxist, Soviet-supported MPLA, which controlled the central government. Savimbi continued to wage a disruptive guerrilla war against the MPLA throughout the 1970s and 80s. In 1991, he signed a peace agreement with the MPLA-led Angolan government that halted the civil war and resulted in free, multi-party national elections in 1992. After losing these elections, Savimbi and UNITA resumed their military struggle for control of the country, with UNITA dominating most of the countryside. Talks were held again, leading to the Lusaka Accord of 1994. Hostilities were to cease and forces were to be disengaged. Jose Eduardo dos Santos, president of Angola, offered Savimbi one of two vice presidential positions, and UNITA was also to be part of the government. Savimbi subsequently rejected the position and was officially designated leader of the opposition in 1997, a position that was rescinded in 1998. Rescinded? I never said that word in my life, I don't think. In 1996, Savimbi indicated that he would retain control of the lucrative diamond regions in northeastern Angola, although some were transferred to the government in 1998. Savimbi faced opposition from the UNITA in September 1998 when a group calling itself UNITA-R suspended him and became the self-declared leadership. From that point, UNITA was split into three factions: the Angolan government and the South African Development Community. Recognized UNITA-R as the official representative of UNITA. Nevertheless, Savimbi requested the renewal of negotiations in March 2001, and he further indicated a willingness to accept the terms of the Lusaka Accord, while the government demanded a ceasefire as a condition of initiating new talks, and Savimbi called for the Roman Catholic Church to mediate the dispute. Fighting continued throughout 2001 and spilled into the neighboring countries of Zambia and Namibia. Government troops continued to pursue Savimbi and finally caught up with him in the eastern province of Mexico. After Savimbi's death, a peace agreement between UNITA and the Angolan government was signed in April of 2002. And that, my friends, is today, February 22nd in Black History. Make sure you like and subscribe. Check out all the other videos I've done up until this point, and stay tuned. Appreciate it. Peace.
Baby.